Hey Cake Chums, and welcome back to another video. Now this week I'm going to be answering a question that I have been asked an awful lot, pretty much ever since I set up my YouTube channel, and that is how to make a white buttercream for whether you're decorating or filling a full-size cake or piping and topping cupcakes. So let's get to the video. Now, confession time, I was actually planning on shooting this video a good few weeks ago now, and then I saw the super talented Cakes by Linz had done a much more thorough and in-depth version of this than I had planned to do. So you may recall actually a few weeks ago in my What's New in Cake video, I pointed out that if you wanted to get into making a white buttercream, you should check out Linz's video. Now that is still the case. If you want to really kind of get down into the nitty-gritty details of making a white buttercream, then I would still recommend you check out Linz's video, and I will link it down in the video description. However, it is a question that comes up all the time, so I figured, you know what, I think I'm still going to do my own take on the theme, and I'm just going to do a really simple how I make my white buttercream for when I'm decorating my cakes video. That way, if you're just looking for a really quick and simple way to make up a batch of white buttercream, perfect, I've got you covered. But as I say, if you really want to get stuck into the whys and wherefores of it, you can check out Linz's, which again is linked down in the video description. So without much further ado, I guess we better get cracking. Okay, so the first thing you're going to want to think about when you're trying to make a really pale white buttercream is the type of butter that you are using. Now, I always use Lurpak for all of my baking, and this isn't sponsored or anything, I just always do. What I like about Lurpak is it's a very pale butter naturally. There are other brands that are also similarly pale in colour. I believe President is also quite popular with bakers as well. But as I say, I always use Lurpak, and that's what I'm going to be using for today's demonstration. Now, I always make my buttercream in one of my stand mixers, and as you can see today, I'm using the Kenwood Chef Titanium. The reason why I use a stand mixer is because one of the ways we're going to get our buttercream super pale is by whipping lots and lots of air into the mixture. If I try and do this by hand, I just don't think you can get it as light. Of course, if you don't have a stand mixer, you can by all means do it by hand, but I don't think you'd get the same sort of results. Now, another important thing to consider is the temperature of your butter. When I know that I'm going to be making some buttercream, I will get my butter out of the fridge and leave it on the side for an hour or two at room temperature to soften up. Now, by soften up, I don't mean that it's so soft that I can literally shove my finger straight through it and it will come back with loads of butter stuck to it. It's soft enough if I push down on it, I can make an impression. Now, I'd like to say that I chop this up, but if I'm being honest, because it's nice and soft, I'll quite often just throw it straight in the mixer, but you can chop it up into cubes if you'd like. Now, I'm using the creaming beater on my Kenwood mixer today, and that's one of these ones that's got like a silicone-y kind of flap on each side around here, and what that does is scrapes the butter away from the side of the bowl constantly while it's mixing, so I don't end up with kind of most of my butter being whipped up and nice and light, but then a kind of a more yellowy shade around the outside. If you don't have one of these, just make sure you're stopping and scraping around your bowl regularly so that all of that butter gets nice and light and whipped. So I'm going to pop this on the stand mixer, pop the lid down, put the light on so hopefully you can see what I'm doing, and I'm just going to whip this, starting on a low speed first of all. Hopefully you can see that because that butter's nice and soft, it's very quickly broken it up from that block. And then I'm going to increase the speed up to almost maximum and just leave it running for about 5 to 6 minutes. In fact, if I show you a very quick, here's what it looks like now. Hopefully, if I'm really clever, I can do a side-by-side comparison later on in the video. So that's what it looks like at the beginning. And then 6 minutes of high-speed mixing coming up. Okay, so my butter has been whipping now for about 6 minutes. And hopefully you can see if I hold up the beater here, it's already a lot paler than it was. But of course, we aren't done yet because we're going to start adding our icing sugar now. And the way I like to do that is by doing it in a little, well, as a kind of half a batch at a time. Now, we didn't explain this earlier on in the video, but you saw me put 250 grams of butter in here. And for a traditional buttercream recipe, you want 2 parts icing sugar to 1 part butter. So with 250 grams of butter, I've got 500 grams of icing sugar. Now, this icing sugar is just supermarket owned brand, and I'll be honest with you, it's not the best quality that I've ever had. It's just what I had in stock at the moment. There are much finer milled icing sugars out there that have less issues with kind of clumping, and that's all to do with the different anti-caking agents that the different brands use. This is actually from Sainsbury's, and I've talked before in videos about the fact that I think they've changed their recipe somewhat, and now it does clump a little bit more, but never mind. So I'm going to put about half of this icing sugar into the bowl, and then I'll leave the other half until after I've mixed the first batch in. So that's probably about half, about 250 grams. So I'm going to pop that to the side, and then this will go back on the mixer. Now, I'm not going to bother using the splash guard today because it's only a smallish batch of buttercream. I'm just going to make sure I start on a really low speed, and hopefully that should avoid that plume of icing sugar in the air that is always irritating. So you can see I've started on a really, really slow speed, and I'm just looking now to see the majority of that icing sugar combined with the butter before I increase that speed up. Another thing I do when I'm making buttercream is I'm not a believer in this kind of school of thought where you should beat it on at a really high speed for a long time. Personally, I tend to beat on a medium speed once I've started adding the icing sugar, and then I'll turn it up to about a number 3 on my stand mixer just to give it a kind of a proper beat. So you can see now most of that icing sugar has disappeared. So I'll turn it up to number 3, and then I'll leave that to run for about 1 minute. That's it. Okay, and then after about a minute, again, if I hold this up so you can see, it's nice and smooth. The majority of that icing sugar has vanished. Again, I'm just going to grab that spatula, whiz around the side of the bowl just to make sure there is no icing sugar caught. Next, we're going to add in the rest of that icing sugar, so the other 250 grams. Don't forget any that fell through the sieve into the bowl. And again, we're going to pop that back on the stand mixer, start on a really low speed. And then once we've seen that icing sugar mostly incorporate into the butter, we're going to turn it up again for another minute on about a number 3. And then again, after that minute or so, the icing sugar has fully incorporated, and you'll see we've now got a really nice pale buttercream. So I'm just scraping off the beater just again to check that there's no kind of unwhipped butter or icing sugar that's caught up on here at all, just to make sure everything gets nicely incorporated. And then the next thing we need to think about is flavouring. Now, where possible, I like to use natural flavourings wherever I can. So for example, if I was making a lemon buttercream, I'll quite often use a combination of lemon zest and lemon juice. However, lemon zest and juice have colour to them, and if I'm trying to make as white a buttercream as possible, the last thing I want to do is introduce something that's going to colour my buttercream. So that means things like coffee extract, or vanilla bean paste, which are usually brown in colour, are not going to help me right now. So ideally you want to reach for an extract or a natural flavouring that has no colour to it at all. So in the case of this batch of buttercream today, I'm going to use the Nielsen Massey lemon extract, which doesn't have any colour to it, it's completely clear. This is a good alternative to lemon zest and juice if, again, you're trying to make a white buttercream. Now personally, I tend to use about 1 tablespoon of extract for every 250 grams of butter. So I've got my tablespoon measure here, and I'm going to measure out 1 tablespoon of that clear Nielsen Massey lemon extract. I'll also follow that up with a tablespoon of cooled boiled water as well. And I find that gives me the right sort of consistency that I'm after. So that will then go back on the stand mixer. And again, I'm just going to start on a low speed to start to bring that liquid into the mixture, and then gradually increase it again up to about a number 3 for another minute. Are you starting to sense the theme here? And now what you should have is a nice smooth buttercream of a good consistency for piping or for decorating your cake. However, if I hold some of this buttercream up next to a plain piece of white paper, you should hopefully be able to see that it's not still a proper white colour. So there are a couple of other things that you can do here if you want to make it even whiter, although to be honest, you could probably get away with it at this stage. Some people like to use a little bit of a kind of a purple or violet food colouring, and we are talking a genuinely tiny bit to strip the rest of that yellow undertone out of your buttercream. It works in exactly the same way as running a toner through freshly bleached hair, if you've ever bleached your hair. I used to bleach my hair all the time, and eventually it ended up so damaged I had to do this, so yes. But anyway, back to our buttercream. So that's one method that you can use. There is also another ingredient that you can add to your buttercream, and that is titanium dioxide, which is also known as E171. Now, this has been available for a long time in a powder form, and you may well know it as Sugar Flare Extra White. For many years now, if I'm making a white buttercream, I've added a teaspoon of the Sugar Flare Super White powder to my buttercream just to kind of push it over the edge into that proper white category. However, recently, as you saw in my What's New in Cake video, Ingenious Edibles released their icing and frosting whitener, which again is also titanium dioxide, E171, and this is in a liquid form. I have to say, I've only tried this once, but I was very happy with the job it did, and the fact that it's in liquid form I think does mean that it mixes in a little bit easier. However, I would like to caveat this with an extra bit of information that has come to light over the last few weeks, and that is that France recently banned E171 or titanium dioxide as a food additive, as studies have suggested that E171 could have some carcinogenic properties. Now, I will just say that E171 occurs in all sorts of different foodstuffs, so please don't panic about using it at all. It's not banned here in the UK, and as far as I'm aware, there are currently no plans to ban it here in the UK. But again, just so that we're aware of the ingredients that we are adding to the food that we're producing, I just thought it was worth mentioning that. We are going to use some of the Ingenious Edibles icing and frosting whitener today, but of course if you don't want to use it, you don't have to. It is just simply an extra step that you can follow to make your buttercream or your frosting, whatever you want to call it, a little bit whiter. Now, the instructions for use on the bottle say to add as much as you need to bring the product you are making to the right shade. But as I say, I've always used about a teaspoon, and so that's what I'm going to use today. And then that can go back on the mixer for one final 1 minute long mix. And then if I take a tiny bit of this on the back of a spoon again and hold it up next to my paper, hopefully you can see that we've got an almost perfectly white shade of buttercream now. And so this is perfect and ready for using on my cakes. Now, when it comes to using my buttercream, I tend to make it a little bit in advance, and then I'll just leave it in the bowl until I'm ready to use it. I find that that gives the icing sugar time to properly melt down into the butter, and then just as I'm about to use it, I'll give it one final beat for about another 30 seconds to a minute before transferring it to my piping bag. Now today, I'm not going to make you wait for that to happen, so instead we're going to pop this straight into a piping bag now, and we're going to put it on top of some cupcakes that I baked earlier. Now I can grab my piping bag, snip off the end, pop in one of my favourite piping tips, which is this closed star. Once I've transferred my buttercream into my piping bag, I like to just push it down to make sure I haven't trapped any air, and then I use one of my fondant smoothers to just scrape it down the bag without hopefully trapping any more air in. And then there is my buttercream ready to use. So here are some lemon cupcakes that I baked earlier on, and my favourite way to pipe my buttercream onto a cupcake is to use a rosette. So to do that, we start in the middle of the cupcake, pipe them out, and then pushing quite hard on the piping bag, we just swirl around the outside. So I'll do that a few more times. Start in the centre, swirl around the outside. And actually the quicker you go, the smoother your buttercream will be. So this is all about practicing until you're nice and confident. So squeeze, swirl, squeeze, swirl, squeeze, swirl, squeeze, swirl. And then hopefully then you can see I have got some beautifully piped rosettes with that lovely white buttercream on top of my cupcakes. And if I compare this back to the original butter that we started with, because I might have a little bit extra here in another packet, can you see the difference between the original shade of that butter and the finished cupcake? But anyway, there you go guys. That is how to make a white buttercream to use in your cake decorating and your cupcake decorating using just the same ingredients you always use, plus a little bit of an extra helping hand if you want one. As I say, if I'm just using that buttercream inside a cake or under sugar paste, I won't often bother with the titanium dioxide. I will simply just use that whipping it as much as I can right at the start, and then choosing those clear, non-coloured extracts to make sure that they don't destroy all the hard work I've put into making that butter nice and pale. I do hope that you found this useful, and if you did, or indeed you just enjoyed watching this video, please do give it a thumbs up down below. And if it's your first time visiting Mr. Baker's Cakes here on YouTube, please don't forget to hit that big red subscribe button before you go today. If you are already subscribed, you can also click on the bell icon to make sure you get a push notification every time I upload a new video, which incidentally I do every Sunday at 10 AM. Next time, why not join me for the live premiere and we can have a bit of a chat alongside the video. If you have any other questions about baking or cake decorating or anything else that you think I could help with, please don't hesitate to let me know down in the comments, or why not head over to social media. You'll find me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, in fact you name it, I'm probably there. And you'll find all of my social media links down in the video description. Until next time, stay safe, take care, and of course, happy caking. Bye guys.